appreciate the opportunity to be with you all today. And I want to start by talking about what it is to be a stage hypnotist. You know, I've been doing it since the 1980s. Actually, since the 1970s, I've been doing hypnosis. And as a child, started doing hypnosis for myself because of something I was taught at the Mayo Clinic. However, years ago, I was performing at a club in Sioux Falls, South Dakota. And it's one of my favorite stories. Very excited, packed house, looking out, feeling very proud of myself that I'd filled the place. And I walked on stage, started my opening monologue, and the police came up and put me in cuffs and arrested me for doing hypnosis. It turns out in Sioux Falls, you need a psychic and clairvoyance license to do hypnosis. And it is illegal to do without it. And a rival club that used to book me actually turned me into the city when they found this out. So off I went in cuffs. And I got very lucky because the owner of the club managed to get the police convinced to just take the bond money, the actual amount that the fine was, and let me go back on stage and perform. Over the years, I've seen so much take place with what is legal, what is not legal, what's accepted, what's not accepted. And today, as we talk, I want to talk a little bit about how you can build your career, how you can build your brand, how you can be amazingly successful as a demonstrational hypnotist, and how you can also lower the risk for everyone in your career. So we have to face the fact that we are not the first people to do this. Here's a fabulous picture of Pat Collins. This signed picture was sent to me by Tommy V a while back. Pat Collins was brilliant, and Pat Collins was branded. She was amazing. You need to be amazing. You need to be great at your job. You need to have charisma and character to do this. The back of her card, where it talks about hypnosis and gives the information that people needed at every table because no one really knew what to expect. How prepared and brilliant is that? As you begin to consider that even every clinical manual from the 1960s and 70s says the prestige of the hypnotist is a factor in how hypnotizable the subject is. The prestige of the hypnotist. You know, people are not comfortable with prestige. When you watch a new magician do a trick and they're stumbling over it, they're not very prestigious. When a hypnotist begins, frequently they're overcompensating. Today, I want you to consider that there are basically 4 phases to your career. You start out like an MC. You're just getting bold enough to be on stage. You're learning to talk in front of a crowd. And you're just getting your craft with regard to being a speaker. During that phase, it's very difficult to pay attention to the subjects on stage enough to split your attention between the audience and those subjects and to keep everybody safe. Eventually, you're a whiz kid, the second phase of your career. During that time, you know the material. The routines are smooth. Most of the time, people love your show. You understand the stage tech. Then you become a seasoned pro, and you're willing to take risks, and your show starts to be unique, starts to be incredibly you, and the people on stage have room to be themselves and really shine. Then you finally get to being a healing entertainer. As a healing entertainer, it's fully about them. It's fully about the people on stage and the audience, and it's no longer about you. This is when you become a master entertainer. And a stage hypnotist, a comedy hypnotist, first and foremost, has a responsibility to entertain, to have the stars of that show, the subjects on stage, blow away that audience. And one of the stars of that show is hypnosis itself. When you begin, you want to do everything you can to become so secure, so at peace, so needless, that when you're on that stage, you have extreme prestige and magnetism. You are able to create the useful myth that is necessary to keep control of that room, to keep people excited, to keep people hiring you again and again and again. For those of us who began in the 80s, in the 70s, most of the venues that booked us, they booked us every single year. If you were full one year, you were full the next decade. It was amazing. You really want that safety. In hypnosis, repeat bookings, when you're a real pro, some of you just saw Richard Barker speak, I would bet Richard has the same experience. I would bet when people book Richard, they book him again and again. So, are you excited about creating this myth around yourself? Are you excited about not needing the admiration? You're not like an actor who needs the people doing this. You're more like Johnny Carson making stars on stage. The more comfortable you are, ironically, the less you need admiration. Frankly, the more you're going to get admiration. For those of us who teach hypnotists, the onus is on us to be able to provoke people at trainings enough to see their real personality. Because in truth, it only takes one bad headline about a hypnotist to cause all kinds of legislative attention in a state. Texas was very difficult for many years. Right now, here in Florida, it requires a medical supervisor or a psych supervisor to do most hypnosis in a clinical setting. And part of that is because of a very negative story that happened because of a principal down here and a student. You, as a hypnotist, can be an ambassador that blows people away. It doesn't matter if you're doing blue material in Las Vegas or if you're doing a squeaky clean family show. What does matter is what they expect, is what they get. And there is one thing that they have a right to expect: to leave better than when they came there. They have a right to expect that nothing bad happens to them. They have a right to expect that they're more confident when they leave that stage than when they came on that stage. We need to be more concerned about that than we are about whether or not they like us. They're going to like you because you like and respect them. Think about the decades, and even longer than decades. Think about Ormond. Here's an Ormond McGill poster. The Seance of Wonders, Dr. Zombie. Think about how amazing and huge these shows were. And yet Ormond McGill was the kind of guy who would take care of people like they were his own kids, like he was taking care of his own grandparents. When we have stage hypnotists that are not narcissistic, not somebody that has to have control, and great entertainers, fabulous people, this whole profession is protected. I wish I could tell you that every person in this business is that type of person, but I would be lying. We need passionate, professional people who are fully aware of what the world works like today. In today's world, material is difficult. In today's world, it's twice as important that your participants pick the level of the comedy and not the hypnotist. It's important that the culture of that show fits the audience that you have right there. So as you consider all of the factors that will make you great, the prestige you need to carry, the image you need to carry. Jeff McBride, the famous magic teacher, is fond of saying, always dress like you have somewhere better to go later. There's no doubt that you should have your own image when you're performing. There's no doubt that you should play your own character. Yet, Your character has to be so good at becoming aware of others and so good at stopping everything to focus on exactly what those people need. How do you keep them safe? How do you make sure nobody falls? I've been teaching stage hypnotists, sometimes in groups of 150 people at a time, for a long time. Franco, the late Franco, when he flew to my training in Las Vegas, had only enough money after a back injury to fly there. He didn't even have enough money for a hotel. He didn't have money for his return flight. He literally slept in the flower bed of the hotel outside where I found him the first night of the seminar. Franco became a full-time hypnotist playing Renaissance festivals all over the country. He enjoyed an amazing life that he would not have been able to live because he was an escape artist who was injured. CJ, a gentleman who flew in and trained with me years ago, the first year after that training, he went from being a magician to doing stage hypnosis. And I believe his testimonial said he did $325,000 the following year. Well, as a family man, as a businessman, that became the launch pad for many, many successes to come. Brian, a US Marine who trained in stage hypnosis, I remember I had so much fun with him because during the marketing phase, he said, "You can't teach me anything about marketing. The US Marine Corps has taught me everything there is to know about marketing because I was a recruiter." And I said, "It's possible, just possible, that there's more to know." He ended up performing on military bases all over. And he and his wife called me from a beach in Hawaii to say how amazing life was doing stage hypnosis. We have a fantastic career. It's miraculous. Think about the first time you saw a stage hypnotist. Really think about the miracle you were watching. If you're from the psych community, you might have wondered what was going on, whether it was good or bad. If you were from the magic community, you probably thought you were watching a stooge act. You probably didn't even know which parts of it were sincere and which parts of it were just leverage because of peer pressure. Today, when you think about a stage hypnosis show, there are really two kinds. Someone rushing through it, wondering if the people will respond right, stepping on all the lines, using music everywhere, taking away all of the drama of the individuals responding because they're afraid something will go wrong. Or the classic style of stage hypnosis, where the pre-talk is legitimate and the induction takes place in a real way. And the drama of that show, the drama of the pre-talk, the drama of the induction is offset with the comedy of the show. So the seriousness of the beginning causes the tension that makes the humor pop as people are just so relieved to finally be laughing. There are the people who are advanced enough to be layering neurolinguistics and platform skills, anchoring all the positives in one area, all the negatives in another area. There are people who are really savvy enough to know why the funny, sad, scary, funny sketches in the beginning, because you're continually suggesting to that audience, this is going to be the funniest thing you've ever seen. There are the people that understand why the hot and cold sketches in the beginning, because it's matching and pacing what's happening to their body temperature. Then there are people who just think all the routines are even or equal. And you can see what happens with regard to who gets sent back, who stays in the show, who doesn't stay in the show, how much they're heckled. At this particular online event, you had some amazing seasoned pros. Amazing seasoned pros. People who have done a lot of work. People who have worked in major tourist cities. People who've had huge auditoriums to play. And what you'll notice is that all of them have their own legend. A hypnotist really needs to respect Jack Sparrow. But you have heard of me. It's very important. In the early years, there's an antique hypnosis book by Professor Leonardis. And they talk about the marketing that they did for hypnosis. They would send a front man into every city, and the front man would go to some of the cafes, and they would say, hypnosis is terrible, it's awful, you wouldn't believe what happened to the people in the other city. And this is the hypnotist's own front man. Then they would go to the other cafe and say, it's a miracle, this hypnosis, it's amazing, it cures people, it makes them feel better. And they'd get the whole city fighting each other. And as that city fought each other, of course, they would picket, quite often, the theater, which would do what? Well, of course, it would fill the theater. It would fill the theater. And so when that theater was full, and we were fighting all these myths and misconceptions about hypnosis, we are the people who made those misconceptions happen, because that conflict is what filled our auditoriums. That premise is the premise of every new show in the country. Pick two sides, because there are never two sides to a real issue, and all paradoxes are fake. But if you want the human mind to get stuck on something, make it clearly two sides and get two sides fighting. Because of esprit de corps, a person will identify with one side and argue with the other. It becomes riveting. We are masters of getting attention, keeping image. And you need to be comfortable, if you're a new hypnotist, with that image of confidence. Magnetism, it happens because of confidence. If you watch any of the people that spoke here, Richard Barker, Marshall Silver, any of them, you'll notice that they are confident, they are congruent, they are not hemming and hawing, they do not answer answers in the middle, they speak in a lot of absolutes, they breathe deeply and are confident. A hypnotist is the ultimate confidence person. A hypnotist is the ultimate congruent confidence person. That's what we do. It gives people an incredible ability to assume that they too could get that confident. Peter Ravine was amazing at this. The famous Canadian hypnotist Peter Ravine, the late Peter Ravine, his son is still out touring as Ravine, and a really great, amazing promoter running a lot of stuff out there. Big stuff. Peter Ravine, hanging out with Lance Burton in Vegas, negotiated Lance Burton's contract just standing there off of the cuff, because he was that kind of confident guy. You, as a stage hypnotist, are giving people a passport to assuming that they could have hope, joy, something magical, make decisions, break through their limitations, even if you don't do any clinical at all. Doug Henning, the magician in the 70s, was really great at taking people into wonder, into curiosity, into joy. The first time I saw a hypnotist, I just couldn't believe my eyes. The first time I saw a stage hypnotist, it literally knocked my socks off. The irony of that is my family was always in hypnosis. My dad and my grandma were both students of Harry Aarons. My grandfather and my dad were students of Thurmond Fleet, who wrote Rays of the Dawn. My family was involved in those shows, doing this type of stuff in vaudeville all the way back to 1915. This is my grandfather's poster from 1915. It is so powerful to realize that you can take a legacy and the skeleton of a show and understand it and then spin it your own way. And you have art, but that art, it has a connection to what has to be true, which is the skeleton of the way that people respond to hypersuggestibility, the way that they love to break out of their limitations and go past prohibitions. Many of the hypnotists here are brilliant at doing adult shows that go slightly past prohibitions. Perhaps you will become one of the artists that knows how to ask just exactly the right question. That every night, if you ask a human being in every city, it will get them to do the exact same line that goes past what the audience thinks they will say. But as a hypnotist, the art form is to get them to do that. As a hypnotist, you get them to show the magic. And that magic could be crude or clean, as long as you are leaving them better than when you found them. And not every hypnotist does that. Hypnosis, unfortunately, is very attractive to people who like power and leverage. Our profession has occasionally almost been legislated out of existence in several areas, predominantly because some narcissist was playing a game for leverage in such a way that it made all hypnotists look bad. If a surgeon is bad, people think that specific doctor was bad. They don't think all doctors are bad. But if a stage hypnotist handles things wrong, and it's the only stage hypnotist those people have seen, they don't think that hypnotist is bad. They think hypnosis is bad. That's why the right training, the right theatrical direction, the right feedback, having your videos reviewed by a seasoned performer, it's just invaluable to saving you time and effort and keeping your reputation where you need it to be. You can be a trusted performer. You can have corporations pay you tens of thousands of dollars. Unfortunately, many people come from a position of lack. It's tragic. It's extremely unfortunate. Everyone needs to do their early shows. You can't charge tons when you have no reputation yet. But it is a big mistake to sell $5 bills for $1. It is a big mistake. I included a quote that Dottie Walters used to use to teach speakers to stop charging too little money. Her problem was, back then, a good corporate speaker was getting like $3,700. Now, of course, it would be much more than that. A broker, an agency, would not handle them if they charged less than that, because the fee that the agency would get would be too low for that agency to handle that speaker. Now, of course, most things are booked online. You've got to realize, though, there are still agents. There are still brokers. Many of them still book me. They book me because of how much money they make booking me. They book me because of where my fees happen to be at for the people who are hiring me. As you book yourself, as you grow, keep in mind, you deserve to be paid. You deserve to be paid. And one of the ways that you protect yourself as a hypnotist is performing with a large enough audience. The fees being the right size puts you in a position where you're not in as many situations where everybody is drunk or the audience is too small. There are places that you don't want to do a hypnosis show. There should be enough people there. You protect yourself by having your fees be high enough that you're in the right place at the right time. There are a lot of ways to get a lot of shows under your belt. Fairs are a great way to get a lot of shows under your belt, frequently doing 3 or 4 shows a day. School tours are great. There was a time on the road where I was doing 3 shows a day doing schools. There are so many ways that you can become a seasoned pro quickly. You can set up clubs every night. And if you're doing a club on every Tuesday night or every Wednesday night, it doesn't take very long until there are literally people spilling into the street trying to see stage hypnosis. But my favorite trick when I was getting good was playing bowling alley bars. At the end of bowling, At the end of bowling, everyone has to go somewhere, and they usually go in the bar. So we'd book the stage hypnosis, we'd give them a time to get a drink, and I would just make a ton being in those bowling alleys. It was like a license to print money. And so I'd get to do 2 shows a night in those bowling alleys, and it was just a blast. I noticed Terry Soaks, very nice comment, thank you, saying I'm making important points. Thank you so much. Terry has incredible experience in adult hypnosis, he and his son. And he's done so much, and he understands getting attention really well. He understands getting attention really well. I was watching you promote in Branson as I was flying in and out of Branson, Terry, and it was great. I was also thinking Marshall Silver's here, and Marshall did so many great things with regard to wanting to teach the idea of prestige, breaking through fear. And everyone has something they want. People spend money to make money, to save money, to improve their appearance, to achieve greater cleanliness, to break through a fear. And your show can have themes that are highly entertaining and highly funny, but they can also be connected to what these people need. Don Wayne was my director. I don't know if you remember who Don is. Don passed away a while ago, but Don was the technical director for a lot of David Copperfield's shows on television years ago. And Don came in to direct the illusion part of my hypnosis show at Mysteria, the dinner theater that I ran for some time. And Don, he said, sometimes it's okay if it's just entertaining. It doesn't always have to be deep. And I think that that's really true in stage hypnosis. As you get through that initial part, don't try to be a smarty pants. Remember what I showed you with regard to Ormond. Now I'm going to show you another guy. Where did he go? Here he is. This is Daniel Schmidt. Now notice Daniel still has that image from back then, right? And it's sort of a magic image thing going on. But here's where you get into trouble. His headline is, Stage Show Funnier Than Hell's a Poppin'. But then it's Professor Daniel Schmidt, President, Pennsylvania Psychological Research Institute, member, International Platform Association, psychologist, lawyer, author, lecturer. Nobody cares about that. Nobody cares. It then says, a scientific and entertaining demonstration of hypnotism. Well, it's very important to understand that that's called a menu of services. And nobody cares about a menu of services. You're a hypnotist. You do hypnotism. That's the point. This fellow is probably great, but, nobody wants Billy Joe Bob, the lawyer hypnotist. And the more educated you seem, ironically, the less people will go into hypnosis for you. The more judgmental you seem, or the more credentials you advertise, the worse your show will go. And, I'm a consultant for a lot of people. And the psychologists, psychiatrists, social workers, and counselors that I work with, and I work with a ton of them. And a lot of them like to do shows. It is so hard to convince them not to call themselves doctor. Nobody wants to go to the doctor. Nobody wants to be poked. Nobody wants to be prodded. They want to have fun. And they don't want to be judged. So there's an important, powerful piece of information. A person who says they worked at U.S. Steel and had a C average, made millions of dollars in the hypnosis industry, following the model from the lazy man's way to riches, Joe Carbo. People will trust someone over the backyard fence more than they will trust an expert. People believe their Google search really is better than going to med school at this point. So the more humble, the more sweet, the more connected, the more intimately vulnerable you are, the better it will go. Vulnerable. Open. The reason that people will react to you as a hypnotist, even without an induction, is because you're vulnerable. Magnetism comes from vulnerability. The hardest part of my job is trying to coach someone who wants to prove they're competent out of acting like that. Getting them vulnerable enough that everything works right, because they're not creating a rivalry in the person listening to them. You don't want a rivalry in those people on stage. You want it to happen quickly. You want your show to be fun. You want the amazement of them going under hypnosis to smoke the audience. There are so many great hypnotists who know how to go past threshold. If they're working in a club, they're having a cocktail and acting like we're loosening up. There's so many ways to get people to lighten up. You acting like a smarty pants is not one of them. Almost every time I'm coaching a hypnotist and they're having trouble, that's why. They're trying to be taken so seriously in the opening monologue that their likability is terrible. It's like they're some kind of wannabe college professor that's going to have 100 people in freshman biology on day 1 and 50 people are going to drop the class by day 2. So we don't want to play this game of competency. They really will let you hypnotize them by waving a plunger in front of their face if they trust you, like you, and you're vulnerable. There's a hypnotist that had the chihuahua, a hypnotizing chihuahua, that would just hold a chihuahua in front of everyone and they would go under hypnosis. So when you see these hypnotists that are acting like, and I have an extensive clinical background, but when you see hypnotists acting like you've got to do really brilliant Ericksonian hypnosis, or you've got to do really great NLP, none of that's true. I mean, you should study all of it, of course, but none of it's true. If you go up there and you're sincere and you're vulnerable and you're likable and you like them, they're going to do it and they're going to have a great time and they're going to hypnotize themselves for you because they want to. They're going to hypnotize themselves for you because they want to. I know that not every entertainer, especially if they come from the magic world, thinks that they're an ambassador for therapists or people who help others to change. But you are. You are. And almost all of the most famous stage hypnotists help people with motivational products, and almost all clinical hypnosis people worth their salt do shows. Because they know you learn more doing a show than you ever learn in clinical training. You understand clinical hypnosis much more if you're a stage hypnotist. And everyone who does them both knows that. Everyone who does them both knows that. So this is another piece of Pat Collins' memorabilia. This is her album that is all self-help tracks, things like, weight loss and confidence and so on. You leaving a piece of confidence with that audience, whether it's a download, whether it's a memory stick, whatever it is, joining your Facebook group. You're literally giving people the ability to book you again, to refer you to other event planners. You're setting yourself up to potentially, as you develop and become better and better at what you do, to reach back out to those people. The student group of the Master Hypnotist Society that I founded, I think Dan Burrows is now the president of MHS, the psychologist from, ironically, Sioux Falls, South Dakota. And I think there's 1,100 clients in the student group, for example. Those 1,100 clients have a culture. In stage hypnosis, we haven't had such a good culture. Stage hypnotists tend to be individual. They tend to be competitive. They tend to be uncooperative with one another. This event is beautiful. I mean, what they've done here is brilliant. It's brilliant. And the people that are cooperating here, maybe 20, 30 years ago, wouldn't have been. So we're getting smarter. We don't want to be illegal. We want to keep doing stage hypnosis. We don't want to have it fall only under the jurisdiction of licensed track folks who haven't even been trained in it, frankly. When we're training each other, I'm meaning to inspire us to do a better job of training the people that we are bringing up in this business. I'm suggesting that real feedback, real show review, risk assessment, discussion, checking our own sanity. You know, a pilot gets a biennial flight review because you get bad habits when you fly an airplane. When I became a captain to do commercial boats, I had to pass a test. When I was flying planes, somebody had to check to see if I was sane. We don't have such a thing in stage hypnosis. And we never will. I'm not for putting a lot of leverage on people. I'm suggesting you personally can take responsibility for getting feedback. You personally can take responsibility for show review. If you were doing a play, you'd have a director. And especially if you're seasoned, especially if you're a veteran, especially if you've done a ton of shows or you've been in this for years, we need that feedback more because we take things for granted. We use expressions from decades ago that don't even make sense to people anymore. We do routine pieces that are nonsense. We need that ability to snap to be fresh. And the people who should be doing that are the other hypnotists. The magic community, in the highest parts of the magic community, is brilliant at this. The Magic Castle, Jeff McBride and his school, they're amazing at this. And the love that goes back and forth between all these people, it's just magical. It's magical. We need that in stage hypnosis. Events like the event that Jim and Sean and everyone here is putting on, Grant, this event starts a digital version of that. For those of you who trained with me over the years, if you were in Vegas or Orlando when I was doing the large stage hypnosis events, you are fully aware of my mentorship program and how invasive it really is. My belief is that stage hypnotists should have a platform NLP background in their basic training. My belief is that they should have a theatrical grounding in their basic training. My belief is that they should understand the fundamentals of why the show is working in their basic training, in their first year of mentorship. But, you know, what do I know? I'm just saying that it's my belief that it makes so much difference if somebody abreacts or starts seizing in your show, if you really know what to do with that and you understand what would and would not cause that. It's a big help. It's a big help if you have enough clinical background. If somebody calls you, you're 100 miles away from a gig, and somebody calls you up and says, Joni can't take her hands apart. And you're like, I never met Joni. I don't know Joni. And it turns out Joni was sitting in the back of the room, half lit, and is now sitting there like this. Sure, you can just suggest what you need to suggest and her hands will come apart if she's not in horrible secondary benefit. But these things really do happen. You can do hundreds of shows and never have somebody cathart or abreact. You can do hundreds of shows and never have somebody have a terrible amount of secondary benefit to the attention that's happening because a suggestion isn't canceling. You can do hundreds of shows and never have someone at the show find the keyword and say it and keep triggering somebody all night because you didn't say only to my voice. But eventually, those things happen. And so, yes, having somebody else listen to your video is powerful. Yes, having somebody else consider where your risks are is smart. Yes, I am for long-term coaching, the same as having a theatrical director. That's how I see it. I would love for the whole industry to see it that way. I really would. So This is an old picture of me way back in the 80s when I was on tour. And that was the way that I was doing hypnosis back then. It was very similar to Ravine in that the first half of the act was hypnosis and the second half was illusions. And I can tell you that that is, in my mind now, not smart, because the show was great. It got booked back all the time. But the hypnosis is much more magical than illusions are. You can't do the most magical thing someone's ever going to see in their life doing a stage hypnosis show and then do this afterthought of tricks and trinkets and hydraulics. There isn't a show, when it's done right, that gets anywhere near the same audience reaction as a stage hypnosis show. There is no entertainment. It was the #1 campus activity for decades on end. Probably still is. Because everyone's favorite subject is themselves. And so the unique selling proposition of the hypnosis show has always been, they're the stars. They are the stars. You are a star because you're Johnny Carson. You are a star because you're the brilliant male or female talk show host, or you're the brilliant, unique personality that's different than everyone else in the room, or whatever it is. But why they love you is because you love them. If you want someone to go into a state of mind, you go into it first. Classic NLP. If you want somebody to go into a state of mind, you have to go into that mood or state of mind first about them. If you want them to love your show, you love them. If you want them to book you back, you take care of their family when they're up on that stage and make them glad they went up there. If there's something off or things go past threshold in a way that's too far, be good at cleaning up. How would you like to be handled if it was you in that chair? I've met a lot of hypnotists who've never been hypnotized. I've met a lot of stage hypnotists who've never been hypnotized, and they somehow think it's okay that they're up there doing what they're doing, when they themselves will say to me, I would never volunteer in this show. That's crazy. I don't understand. I would never put someone in a position I'm not willing to be in. I don't think anybody should. But I'm not the only view. If we don't do what I'm saying, it is my suspicion that jurisdiction by jurisdiction, it will be harder and harder to do our show because they will not let it stay legal. I'm against that. I might be the only one here who's been in cuffs because I was doing hypnosis on a stage. So I'm very serious about the legacy of what we do because I believe it's how we determine whether or not we get to keep doing it. This is a letter I got when I was first teaching from Ormond McGill. Dear Scott, returned a week or so back from attending Gil Boyne's conference in Glendale. Then this weekend seeing Randy Church and Marlene Mulder at their school in Santa Rosa, for which I teach on occasion. While there, they received your brochure of your upcoming stage hypnosis seminar. This is March 3rd of 1998. Just wanted to tell you how excellent it is, and the planning of instruction that you're presenting is splendid success in every way. As you say, hypnotism shows are surely becoming popular these days. All best wishes, Ormond McGill. Ormond spent a lot of time with a lot of people. It was incredibly generous. He did it until he was very old, very old. I like to consider him a walking ball of light. I like to explain Ormond by saying if you ran up to Ormond and kick him in the shins, I think he would just say good kick. He understood people, understood the people who needed to come down a notch, go up a notch. The man worked with John Wayne, Hedy Lamarr, did amazing shows. If you ever get a chance to see video of his illusions or what he did in magic, he took me to school. Blew my mind what he did. And yet he would audience people and care about people and help them develop and sit and demonstrate stuff and lovingly be awesome. You saw all the great pictures of Ormond with Tom. Just an amazing guy. Dr. Kit, who toured out of Montana, Wyoming. Amazing man, loving, spectacular human being. Had a t-shirt shop up there when he wasn't on tour. Lovely guy, amazing guy. So you have this legacy of people who shared their act and shared what they do and lovingly tried to instill a set of values in people to protect an amazing entertainment that changes what people think is possible or not possible for them. It's amazing. And some of you might have done it so long you forgot that it's a miracle. It's a miracle. It's a miracle that this exists. And there are people like Thurman Fleet who took the concepts. The beginning of my show is actually Thurman Fleet's routine with lemons. It's Dr. Thurman Fleet who walked out in front of people the first time and took the lemon out and began chewing it and looking at people in the audience and saying, I see you're puckering right along with me. You're responding to suggestion. That's Dr. Thurman Fleet. And Fleet was a chiropractor he created something called concept therapy and conceptology. The concept, the idea that ideas themselves are impacting the body a certain way. And Fleet's opening is the opening that I used in stage shows for decades on end. And many, many other people use it as well. These people changed lives with shows. These people made incredible entertainment happen and took people away from being very bored. They changed what those people thought could be done in their lives. And so I hope you find this career as sacred as I do. I hope you find it as sacred as Ormond McGill did. I hope you find it as sacred as Peter Ravine did. Because it is a huge responsibility to take individuals out of a crowd, put them in a line of chairs, take away that they're deciding what they're going to do and not do, be in that situation where they're trusting you, and have a personality where you don't want to take care of them. I want that show to be great. I want it to be hilarious. I want it to be just awesome. But I want those people to get home happier that they did it than that if they didn't do it. It needs to be the number one ethic in any stage hypnotist, because you've got to remember, it's not a stooge act. It's not a stooge act. And the people that are up there who are stressed, that are kind of a somnambulistic person right away, that person needs something. They're needing out of that stress. And so the people who began this thought of it as a sacred duty. You know that there were shows just taking ether and knocking people out with ether before ether was even used in medicine. And people just watching each other fall over with ether. Eventually that became the modern singles bar, and it was alcohol. I'm just suggesting that maybe, I wonder if we could decide, even if we're doing an outrageous show, to double check our thinking by having other people feedback on that show and direct that show. And I'm just curious if those of us who think other people should respond to suggestion will ever learn to respond to feedback ourselves. that's really all I really had to share with you today. I'm really glad I got to spend this time with you. And, I guess if there are any questions about what I talked about, we have about 10 minutes or 5 minutes together. And I would sure ask them if anybody wants to ask in the Q&A section. Diego says, how would you ask for the feedback for your show? The best way is to have a paid consultant. A paid consultant is by far the best. And the paid consultant concept is this simple. If somebody's giving you free feedback and they're not a pro, they may not know what is the most important thing for you to hear. So the best way, Diego, is to be in a mentorship with somebody, one of these great veterans here, and have meetings where they go through your video and they give you feedback like a theatrical director, where they have technique feedback, safety feedback, entertainment feedback. That's the best way to do it. Otherwise, break up some categories and just have people that were there give feedback. But if people are there, they're going to love you. They're going to want to tell you good things. And even if they're being honest, they may not be honest enough. That's right. So Dana has her hand up. I'm not sure if I have a way to allow to talk. There you are, Dana. Go for it.
Oh, that was actually kind of a mistake, but I do have to say there was a fantastic way to wrap up the whole symposium. Thank you so much for sharing. Yeah, you've had quite the adventure, with hypnosis over these years, and so I'm wondering what are you doing any shows now?
Dana, I have a group called the Master Hypnotist Society, and there's a few vocational schools in that group, a lot of clinics in that group, and a lot of stage hypnotists in that group. So I spend a huge percentage of my life coaching either the people that are running the schools or doing the behind-the-scenes marketing for those people. For instance, last year I spent a bunch of time at University of Central Florida doing their digital marketing program, for example. Like I'm working with all of these other professionals. I do a few shows a year. But I probably do 30 shows a year nowadays. But there was a time when I was doing 300 or 400 shows where I was doing multiple shows a day. I mean, there are years I was doing 3 schools a day every day for 9 months every year, and that certainly is no longer true. So that's kind of how that went.
Awesome. Thank you for coming on here. Much appreciated.
Yeah, thanks. Good to see you. And Michael, I'm going to go to you. Trying to let you talk. Ooh, there you go. Michael Brody.
Hi, I just wanted to know that, first of all, your talk was amazing, and I videotape all my shows, and I analyze my shows. I have a background in theater also, and speaking of, you're talking about being a director, and I'm a director and an actor, so I do all those different things. And I think it's very important for people to also, one of the things that hit me, what you were talking about, is that people who are us, our hypnotists, absolutely need to be hypnotized and understand what it feels like, and if you can't, what you were saying, if you can't experience what it feels like, how can you judge yourself on that?
Right. If you don't know what convinces you it's happening, you don't know what convinces them it's happening emotionally or physically. That's right, Michael. And I was a theater major originally, and then switched to psych, and then bailed, and then transferred all my stuff out to California and finished the AIH program years ago, which is a whole long other adventure. But being a theater person helps. And Alan Sands is here also, and he's got an amazing performance background to share as well. I know he talked about other things today, but he's got a lot to share. But Michael, I appreciate what you're saying, and thanks. I appreciate your comment.
Thank you.
Okay, so if there's no other questions, which I don't see any, I really appreciate all of your attention for my little rant today. If you have any questions about what I do, I gave a little script from an old seminar in the chat. in the chat in the lobby. And I also included a link to a very beginner little web course on stage hypnosis that's on one of our old websites, just to give something away. And if you're starting out, it'd be good. If you're already pretty advanced, there might be a couple ideas in there, but you probably are way ahead of the game. Keep in mind that we do at least a couple of stage hypnosis workshops a year. Some of them I teach within, but most of the time it's people like Robbie Spearmiller or Jeff Martin, people that I trained over the years that are doing that nowadays. But I sure appreciate getting to play, and I really want to thank Jim and for getting a hold of me, and Grant and Sean, Tech Genius, and all of that. And it's really fun to see what everybody did, and it was great to pop in and out of people's classes and see how great everyone was doing. It's awesome. Thanks for having me.
Thank you, Scott. That was tremendous. I mean, really, you covered so much, and I got to say, there's this theme that I've heard from all the people that met him. I mean, everybody has just talked about what an amazingly kind and knowledgeable guy Orman McGill was. I wish I could have met him. Wow.
Mm-hmm. Well, when you meet Tom and you meet myself to some degree, and a lot of these other people, I'm a little bit more provocative. I didn't talk about that today, but I wanted to talk, and I forgot to talk about why in training you need to provoke the student, and why you need to see what happens if the student is triggered, because you need to understand the level of maturity of someone before you're kicking them on stage. I forgot to kind of cover why I do that with students and what the outcome of that has been. Orman was just sweet to everybody. He couldn't have been more kind. He was really, truly a gentle person. And there's one way that I very much differ in training philosophy. I'm a little bit like, kind of believe in the idea of why the military does the way basic training works. There's a reason why the person is pushed a certain way in the beginning. You learn so much about what they do and don't know, where they are mature and where they aren't mature in that moment. And when running seminars, of course, this is a delicate balance, because you don't want to really freak them out, but you want to see, what does this person know and what don't they know,
Yeah.
Where are they at? And it's harder to do than most people think, but it's what makes the multi-million-dollar student versus the hobbyist.
Are you able to give just a really quick example of what that might look like?
Disagreeing, somebody's being intense, somebody's stating a position, somebody's drawing a line in the sand themselves, and just drawing the opposite line in the sand with great intensity in an excellent case, and pushing it.
Nice.
And watching how do they behave, can they consider it, are they provoked and then hyper defensive,